Welcome in, everyone, to Scoop du Jour. I'm Jourdan Black. You know, when someone is equally as nice as they are hardworking, I feel like maybe that's a theme with Scoop du Jour, but that is especially the case with our guest this week, Tom Hannifan. He is such a nice guy, and I can attest to that because we had the opportunity to work on another project together after actually this episode was recorded. So I had the pleasure of working with him on a football show and got to know him quite a bit offline, which is kind of rare for some of my guests who I just reach out to and ask if they want to be part of the show, and then meet them through interviewing them and then get to know them. But what's really cool about Tom is we kind of got to know each other through this side project after doing this interview, as I said. Now, through this interview, I got to meet Tom Hannifan. So let's introduce him. He is a wrestling commentator and sports broadcaster. The first wrestling guest we've had on the show, which is really neat because wrestling is not something I know much about. He's commentated for WWE and now does a lot of work with Impact Wrestling, which is a huge and really interesting organization. So he tells us all about his career trajectory, his day-to-day, what it takes to kind of get ready for this line of work and how much goes into it. Like I said, what it took to get into this and how he kind of got his big break. He also has a podcast about Penn State. So we talk a lot of college sports, and then just get to know him. One of the really cool things that I will use as a teaser, if you will, is I asked him who the coolest contact in his phone is, and you won't want to miss that. So really excited to introduce Tom Hannifan to Scoop du Jour, a really great follow on social media. If you love sports, any type of sports, he is as great a human as he is a sports aficionado. So if you like this episode and any others of Scoop du Jour, as always, encourage you to like, subscribe, follow, rate, review, and tell your friends about the show. And without further ado, here is this week's episode of Scoop du Jour with Tom Hannifan. Welcome into Scoop du Jour, Tom Hannifan. I'm so excited to have you, broadcaster, play-by-play commentator, our first wrestling-oriented guest on Scoop du Jour. This is exciting because, Tom, you and I were talking before we hit record, which is my favorite thing to do, get all of the juicy stuff before hitting that red button, that I am not a wrestling connoisseur. First of all, welcome in. I'm so excited to have you and to learn about you and to learn about your passion for this sport. Let's talk about how you got into this, but also just this crazy story you were telling me. You were looking for a job after college. Tell me that story.
Yeah, so I think anybody that's gone to college for broadcast journalism in the last 10, 20 years has graduated school and been like, now what? You know, you're trying to find a job. It's always been a tough job market. It really has. And it's evolved so much in the last 10, 15 years. It's so competitive. The way that social and digital media have evolved, there's fewer jobs and everybody's really working hard to get those spots. So when I graduated Penn State in 2011, I was working in state college at a nearby Division III school, junior out of college, calling their men's, women's basketball, doing their football. I was making $50 a game. Obviously, that was not going to cut it in terms of paying my bills. I was working at an Olive Garden as well to try and make ends meet. So, you know, it was a glamorous time. And
I have a lot of questions about that.
Sure. Oh, yeah, we'll get to that in a second. But yeah, I had found a job lead online in 2012 saying that WWE was hiring. It was on a website that I still recommend to kids that are in college now. It's called staatalent.com.
Yeah.
A lot of good job leads. You probably heard of it.
Yeah.
And my roommate at the time was like, try it, apply, see what happens. You might screw up. Who cares? At least it'll be a good story, right? It's WWE. And so I auditioned in June of 2012. And I thought it went okay. I thought I had, some good play-by-play stuff. I was a little worried about the interview stuff and some other things on camera, pitching things, selling things. I wasn't really too confident in that. Didn't have a ton of experience in it at that point. And I was very, very fortunate, very lucky that they took a flyer on me and hired me in September 2012. I worked there for about 9 years. And then as of January 2022, I started working with Impact Wrestling, which has been such a wonderful experience for me. And the company overall is just rolling. And if you'd asked 18-year-old me, hey, do you think you'll wind up working in pro wrestling one day? He'd have been like, no, what are you talking about? But I was just lucky that I got introduced to this world that, while I was interested in as a kid, like a lot of people are, can't say I was a diehard fan. I've been straight up about that for many years, and I just fell in love with it. And now this is not only is it my job, but it's my passion, and everything that I get to be a part of with Impact, it's just so fulfilling. I can't put it into words entirely.
Yeah, so for those who don't know, now you're with Impact, like you said, and you were with WWE, and you started backstage, from what I understand, as a reporter, and then they kind of brought you in. Like, tell us how the transition went, and how you kind of worked your way up through what is this iconic brand of wrestling.
Yeah, I really just had no idea what I was getting into. I was 23, I really had not gotten a ton of experience in sports broadcasting of any kind. So I did a lot of things in their studio in Connecticut, and they taught me basically how to walk as a broadcaster, a lot of baby steps, working in the studio, working on a prompter, working off a prompter, all sorts of things, working with a partner, and then eventually sending me to their TV tapings that they were doing down in Orlando, Florida, for a show called NXT, which is on USA now at this point. At that point in time, they had other play-by-play announcers. So like, all right, you're going to be, a backstage interviewer, and, it's scripted. You're not so much being the reporter who's catching, a player after the game, be like, wow, you had 38 points and 12 rebounds. How did you do it? Whatever. No, you have a script. So you're acting to a degree. So I don't think either you or I went to broadcast journalism school to try and get an acting degree. So there's a lot of things you learn on the fly. Work behind the scenes, doing that sort of thing for a while, and then eventually got a shot doing play-by-play on NXT, called up to what was referred to as the main roster to do some stuff on a show called Main Event. Superstars was another show as well. And then gradually over time got opportunities on WWE's biggest shows like Smackdown, Raw, major pay-per-views like WrestleMania, the Royal Rumble, Survivor Series, SummerSlam. I just got very fortunate that I was put in a lot of positions to succeed with a lot of really good people. I learned a ton of things along the way. And again, it was just something that I came into it really not knowing what I was about to deal with. But I'm so glad I experienced all these things.
You know what stuck out to me that you said is like that there's an acting element, and I've always thought it's so interesting. Broadcasting is not acting, right? It's as real as it gets, but there is this element where you have to come to work every day and put on, no matter how you're feeling, right? Because you're in front of a camera and everyone sees you, whether you're in a tiny market like I started, Greenville, Mississippi, and there's a town of 30,000, or you're on pay-per-view, right? So how did you find that element of really acting, but having gone to school for broadcast journalism where you're taught to just be so authentic and real? How did you manage those two things?
It took a while. It just took a lot of trial and error, because you have to believe it. You have to believe that, oh my God, he just betrayed his best friend, and then walk backstage and see them be like, hey, you okay? You good? Oh, that was awesome. Yeah, that was great. Oh, you hit me with the chair. That was awesome. So you have to believe these things. And it took me years to really let it sink in. The psychology of pro wrestling, so to speak, is very, very unique. There's almost nothing like it. You do have to separate yourself from anything you might have learned in sports broadcasting, because statistics, for the most part, aren't the biggest thing there. It's not like baseball where it's like, this is the guy's ERA when he plays on the West Coast or something like that. It's more the story. It's the emotion. I'd say it's closer to whatever your favorite TV show is, and that those actors know where the story is going, but you're discovering it as a fan as everything goes by. And then I remember hearing it described at one point by current WWE superstar Xavier Woods that it's the last true example we have of theater in the round. I'd say outside of Cirque du Soleil, it's theater in the round. You have to work the entire venue. You have to work 360 degrees. You have to work the cameras at home. There's so many elements to it. And then for us on commentary, or if you're a backstage interviewer, you're acting, you're voice acting. You have to you have to emote and put out a lot of energy, but you're in this situation like I am right now. You're sitting here. Like, most actors have the opportunity to be standing, to be mobile, to really throw themselves into the scene. Imagine being seated and screaming at the top of your lungs that somebody was committing, bloody murder, so to speak, in the middle of the ring. It doesn't come overnight. And I remember being told very early on in WWE that they're like, this is going to take you 10 years to comprehend this. And I'm very fortunate. I've been in this field now for 11 years, and I feel very, very good about my body of work. And I'm just continuing to improve upon it every single week. And I'm glad I can do that with Impact. It's just been, it feels like a company that's trending in the right direction. I'm glad to be a part of it.
What are some of the coolest things you've been a part of, whether it's like a crazy storyline or an interesting place you've been? Like, take us back to something neat. I mean, there's probably a long list. Like, lay it out.
Yeah, there's a million of them. I'd say the craziest thing is I've been slapped on television by Stephanie McMahon. So
For real slapped.
For real slapped. So for those that don't know, Stephanie McMahon is a longtime on-screen character, but far more importantly, a longtime member of WWE's management, obviously a part of the McMahon family. Stephanie is a wonderful person. I remember, I think it was December of 2015. It was a few days before Christmas. There was a storyline on TV where at the time Stephanie was playing a bad guy, and she was a member of the authority figures on the show and the management on the show, but she was a bad guy. And she had hatched some plan to ruin things. I believe it was for Roman Reigns at the time, and everything goes up in smoke. Maybe it was Dean Ambrose. I can't remember who it was. Anyway, everything goes up in smoke. And then my role as the interviewer was to go up to her the very last minute on the air and ask her, how you feeling about all your plans going up in smoke. Now, I knew about all of this in advance, is that the story idea was for her to slap me. Now, Stephanie McMahon has famously slapped a lot of people on screen in WWE as part of the storyline. I can't imagine if there are surprises, but I imagine they were all real. And I remember being backstage there, and I know it was challenging for me because I'd really maybe been in one or two fights in my entire life. So having a strike come to you and it's going to happen and you have to allow it to happen is a very different thing than just kind of being in the moment with something.
Yeah.
And she got me real good. There was a nice shiner under my eye after the fact. And you just kind of have to grit and bear it. And then the difficult thing coming back to acting is that knowing it's coming, you can't flinch. You have to just stand there and take it like it's real. So it was very real.
Wait, and then afterwards, like, what did you guys say to each other? Did she apologize?
There's nothing to apologize for because it's all part of the plan, right? So, everybody's like, are you okay? I was like, yeah, I was okay. And went back and checked with the powers that be, and they want to make sure I was okay. And I was like, yeah, I'm great. Like, they were unbelievably good to me because I had been approached about the thing hours and hours beforehand. I was taken care of before, after, during. Like, everybody looked after me. Like, I couldn't have been in better hands. It's just that's what the scene called for, and that's sometimes what your job can be in professional wrestling. Is sometimes there's a little physicality involved.
That is wild, and I think it'd be worse knowing versus, like you said, just having no idea and just getting in a fight. Which reminds me that, so you don't necessarily have like many of us sports broadcasters, we just get into this job because we love sports, but we didn't necessarily play college football or basketball, especially me. But in high school, you ran track, and I saw you played backgammon, which is very interesting.
Yeah, so I think that's something somebody put up as a joke on my Wikipedia. Yeah, I never played backgammon.
Okay, we have to edit Wikipedia. That's the whole point of Wikipedia.
I never look at it. I've been asked that question a couple times, and I'm like, where?
I'm like looking at my notes. Played backgammon. I mean, and like not that that's a sport, but I was like, okay, I guess I need to.
Let me ask this nerd about this. No, so I did run track. I ran the 100 and the 4x1, and then I also played football from freshman year to senior year of high school. I played baseball a little bit when I was a kid. I played soccer a little bit when I was a kid, but yeah, in high school I played quarterback, wide receiver, and safety at different points, and then the 100 and the 4x1 in track and field.
Maybe someone will link to this podcast as an update to the Wikipedia
Yeah,
page.
just something like who plays backgammon that is under 85? I don't know.
No, and also, is backgammon considered a sport? Because to
Yeah,
me, that's a board game.
I have no idea. I'm going to be real honest with you, Jourdan. I don't think I've ever played backgammon.
No, and like you said, you have to be over 85. So, I mean, I think we don't qualify as backgammon players. That's also a testament to, I guess, checking your links and your fact checking, right? Wikipedia. It's
Also,
not
I
the
don't
best.
check Wikipedia, so that's also probably a healthy thing too.
Okay, all of that said though, so run track, play high school sports, but go to college at Penn State because you're from Pennsylvania and love Penn State. Like, what leads you there? And what leads you into like becoming Penn State super fan besides being an alum?
Well, I was born and raised in it. So my mom was class of 78 nursing at Penn State. So we grew up with the Penn State Blue Band fight songs playing in the house on a cassette tape, just on a loop. So we were indoctrinated at a young age in a good way. And I remember seeing LeVar Arrington, a legend of Penn State football, live play at Beaver Stadium. Every other snap, I'm like, where's LeVar? Where's LeVar? So you just kind of fall in love with it from such an early age, and being in Pennsylvania most of my life and being around other Penn Staters, it just became part of our lives. And my brother went to Penn State. He was 2 years ahead of me. He graduated as part of the NROTC program, got a political science degree. So I, tagged along after him like a lot of little brothers do. And I went into the communications school. I started at Penn State Altoona my first 2 years. So I went to main campus my junior year, had a wonderful experience. That's one of the nice things about Penn State, is that there's all these satellite campuses that you can take advantage of. A lot of people that I've known that have gone online or gone locally because they still want the education or the experience, but there's just nothing like that big school type of feel. I think, if I'm correct, you're a Tar Heel. Would I be correct?
I'm wearing my Tar Heel sweatshirt right now.
There you go. There you go. Now, my dad.
You did your correct research.
I
did,
did.
but I don't have a Wikipedia.
Now, my dad did go to Duke.
So should I press unrecord and hang up?
This might be the end of this interview. Yeah.
I've interviewed so many people who have Duke connections and Tar Heels too. And we have a mutual respect, is what I always say. We can all be friends. But do you root for Duke?
Occasionally, as I got out of college, I was more leaning towards following Penn State basketball than I was Duke. I think I was following Duke basketball mostly into college. And then once I was there, a part of Penn State, kind of turned my fandom elsewhere. And then once I started working the breakneck schedule in WWE, I wasn't paying attention to college basketball as much anymore. But yeah, still keep tabs on Duke, keep tabs on Penn State basketball altogether.
That's fair. And what I always say for Duke fans is, like, if you have a reason to like Duke, that's fine. I meet all of these people who are like, I love Duke. And then it's just because they like them, but they don't have a family member or didn't go to Duke. And again, I understand a lot of people just like teams to like teams, but a lot of people just like Duke because they were powerhouses, or a powerhouse at some point. And I wish they had more of a connection. So we will allow your, liking Duke.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Approved fandom. So at Penn State, that's when you kind of got into commentary. Is that correct?
Yeah. So when I was, I think I was a sophomore in high school, I had an injury and I wasn't able to play in a football game. So I asked if I could do PA announcements.
Cool.
And my friend and I at the time had way too much fun with it. We got in trouble because we were just kind of going a little overboard. Didn't say anything inappropriate, but like if you were the opposing team, you'd be like, come on, man. So I had fun with it. But I think, like a lot of people that want to get into sports broadcasting, you turn on the TV and you hear these people do this and you see them talk on camera and you're like, oh, that looks like fun. You get to go to the game. You get to talk about it. Some people maybe even naively look at it and think, oh, that looks easy. I could do that. And it's extremely difficult. So I was very fortunate to get to go to Penn State and be a part of their college communications. I worked at Com Radio, which is their student radio to this day. Worked under Jeff Brown, who's a phenomenal manager for the radio to this day as well. Some wonderful people like Mike Porman, who's still in the College of Communications, and some other fabulous professors. So that's where I really got to start doing play-by-play and also learning color commentary, learning talk radio. Remember radio when that was the thing? And at that point, podcasting really had not blown up, or I don't even really remember when it started necessarily. So yeah, there were a lot of things that I just learned the basics of when I was at Penn State. So while I felt informed and prepared and ready to be a play-by-play guy or a reporter or something like that, everything that I went on to do, especially in pro wrestling, just nothing would have truly prepared for it. But I at least had a fabulous pedigree from Penn State.
Now, when you prepare, as you're talking about, for commentary for Impact Wrestling, what does the prep look like for something that is scripted, if you will?
It's just knowing where the story is going. And we have the gift of foresight. So, for instance, currently watching the NBA playoffs, wouldn't you love to know exactly where Celtics 76ers is going? Well, oh my gosh, if Joel Embiid winds up in the finals and he wins the championship and the MVP, what a great story that is. And all these little breadcrumbs you could leave along the way. Well, we have that gift because we understand where the stories are going, so we can drop in certain things. And then there's other elements that I don't want to know because I want to respond organically, kind of like you were saying about conventional sports play-by-play. You're reacting in the moment. I think of all the great Mike Breen calls covering the NBA, since we're on the subject, and just how organic and natural they feel, and you can hear his enthusiasm and his excitement. We're trying to communicate the same thing, but then it's also making sure, hey, did that word hit perfectly for this character? Does this describe the true actions? Did this person earn this opportunity, or did they just capture it? And there's a lot of different things. Did they steal this? Did they take this? Did they win this? There's a lot of different little things that can completely change the complexion of a story. And the same thing goes again in conventional television, conventional movies that you see, is that we're telling broader stories, but we have to be very, very specific on commentary because one word can change the entire picture of it. And you got to backtrack all these things. So especially when it comes to preparing for a broadcast, I'd like to have my stats and my historical figures, but I only utilize them when they reinforce the story that we're trying to communicate, because otherwise they're just superfluous.
That's so interesting, because I feel like for someone, like I was saying, who's almost an outsider, not almost, but is, to the wrestling world, you see it as all not being authentic, really, for lack of a better term. But there is so much that, like you're saying, you don't want to know. And I think that'd be a really interesting element for folks to hear who aren't as familiar, like myself. I'm curious too, what else people who aren't familiar might not know that would be interesting.
About pro wrestling specifically?
Yeah.
There's so many layers to it. I mean, pro wrestling, I've heard a million people say, oh, well, it's fake. So is Succession. That's not a real story. Okay. Now, we are telling stories that have kernels of truth, but we are exaggerating things. We're trying to play on all those things. It's why normal sports are so great, is because we know there's like, ooh, there's this drama between this person and this person, and it just gets blown up within the throes of competition. That's the beauty of it. Well, in pro wrestling, we can take that maybe kernel of truth and we can really stretch that. What is not fake about pro wrestling is the physicality. That ring hurts. I have maybe fallen in a ring once or twice intentionally. It hurts a great deal. These people put their bodies on the line on a regular basis, and what they're able to accomplish from an athletic standpoint is eye-popping. There are very few athletes on the planet who can do what they do. It's the equivalent of being a stuntman in a movie, but then you have to turn around and deliver the lines of the leading man. It's a rarity to find people who are truly gifted in this. And we're very fortunate with Impact. Our roster is outstanding. We got a lot of people who can do some awesome things in the ring, on the mic, backstage, media, you name it. There's so much that gets asked of you. I think especially in professional wrestling, for instance, people are like, well, why is there a referee in there? Well, the referee is part of the dance as well. The referee is in there to help be a facilitator of communication to the wrestlers in the ring and the story that they're telling, because things happen, things go wrong, injuries can happen, etc. There's direct communication with the backstage area. A lot of people might not fully understand that, but that is the extension of the backstage production crew in the ring to assist with what is going down. And then especially, it's a television product. So you and I both know that if you're watching any sort of sport, you got to take an ad break, right? Well, a wrestling match just can't go on and on and on and on and on. There needs to be an ad break. So these people, while they're trying to put together a planned choreograph match, they also have to hit a specific time. So imagine trying to be in there and be like, hey, you've got to punch me and throw me to the outside and then get me back inside cover and kick me. And then, well, we got to go to break in 5 seconds and we got to make it look compelling so that you'll stay tuned when we come back on the other side of the break. There's a million layers to it. It's very complicated, but it's so much fun.
We had on an earlier episode of Scoop du Jour in season 1, a player from the Savannah Bananas, and it kind of reminds me
so much fun, right?
So fun. And I've never been to a game, but it's a hyper fixation of mine is their TikTok. The fact that people think like they're not playing baseball, right? Like they're playing baseball, but it's entertainment. Yeah. So and one of the things that Michael, the player, described is like, we're still playing the game of baseball. We've just changed some of the rules and the entertainment value. And isn't that the great thing about sport, is that every sport is there to entertain. And I think that's what you're describing as well. It's entertainment. It's just in a different form. I'm curious what the best place you've been because of Impact or WWE, what the sport, where the best place the sport has brought you.
Oh man, well, I've been very fortunate to work in London in the UK a handful of times. I mean, the fans there are so much fun. I just love the pace of life altogether in the UK. So I've always enjoyed that. The fans in Canada are awesome. They are ravenous for pro wrestling. For us in Impact, we were just in Toronto, Ontario, Canada for a Rebellion pay-per-view. Very fortunate that we have this great fan base in Canada. But at the same time, I believe I've been to 44 out of 50 states. Wow. And I forget how many countries at this point, but I'm just very lucky that I could say that I've been to all these little corners of the country and the world and seen places that otherwise I never would have seen. And it's just given me this great life and all these great opportunities. Met so many people that I like. You ever go into your contacts and you're like, I wonder how many people are, and you're like, that's too many people. There shouldn't be that many people in this phone. And you try and delete names or something like that if you haven't talked to them in 10 years or something like that. But just very fortunate that I've made a lot of really great connections over the years.
I thought you were going to tell us the most famous person in your contacts.
I'd say it's Ric Flair. Yeah, I'd say it's Ric Flair.
Whoa.
Yeah, Rick's a great guy. Rick's a great guy. He's a good time always.
What is he like how he seems?
Yes, 100%. No, he's a very sweet, endearing man. Very fortunate that I've had shared a drink or two with Rick. So he knows how much respect I have for him. I was really touched to be a part of an event that went down last year in Nashville called Ric Flair's Last Match. It was put on by Jim Crockett Promotions and some mutual friends between Impact Wrestling and other wrestling promotions. So to be asked to be at that event and to contribute in some small way meant the world to me. I was absolutely humbled. Rick and I had worked together in WWE, and he's just always been such a great person to deal with. So it is kind of crazy. Yeah, I'd say that far and away, Ric Flair is the most famous person on my phone.
Yeah, I was like, I mean, that's a pretty big one.
Yeah, I'm fortunate.
Yeah, that's a big deal. We won't ask you for the phone number. Aside from wrestling, what is your favorite sport to watch? I'm assuming it has to do with Penn State, but I'll let you answer.
Yeah, that's a good guess. No, I am a football junkie. Like when I say that, it's not just like, oh, I like Penn State football. It's like, no, I'm a Philadelphia guy, so I'm a Philadelphia Eagles fan. But I
Right.
am an NFL fan. I am a college football fan at virtually every level of college football. I'm talking about FBS, FCS. If I'm in a pinch, I will watch D2, D3 football. I have watched the XFL. I've watched the USFL. I pretty regularly pay attention to the Canadian Football League as well. I was big into the Arena Football League when I was a kid. When I was living in Orlando between 2016 and 2019, I was interested in the Alliance of American Football and the Orlando Apollos. Like, I need a life.
It
So
doesn't matter what it is. If it's football and it's on, you will watch
if
it.
there's a pigskin flying through the air, I'm interested. Yeah.
And you go to a lot of games. You watch them on TV, both.
I far and away watch more games on TV. I have made it a point in the last year or two to try and go to more games outside of the normal games I've gone to for most of my life in terms of like home Eagles games, home Penn State games. Those are great places to be, and there's nothing that's ever going to replace home. But this past year, I was very lucky that within the span of a couple of months, I went to my first Canadian Football League game in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. I went to Penn State versus Auburn in Auburn, Alabama, which was a great
That's a good one.
experience. And then I got to go to a home game at Penn State, and I got to see I got to see the Eagles versus the Titans in Philadelphia in early December. So, I mean, got to a lot of games, which was really, really cool. I'm also the type of person that, like, I remember spending some time in the state of Maine, and I went to a University of Maine football game on my own just because I wanted to go. And I had a great time on my own. Like, I was in paradise. I just love it. I love the sport. I got to play it a little bit when I was a kid. I played some Pee-wee football in Connecticut, the Farmington Mudhogs with the Golick boys, and then went on to high school and played a little bit there, got injured a lot, and still love the sport to this day.
Just when you were taking a break from backgammon, you played football.
Yeah, taking a break.
Yeah.
I just wanted to focus because backgammon is just so all-encompassing.
So rigorous.
I know.
What did you make of the Eagles draft?
Loved it. I really loved it. I mean, we're basically the Georgia Bulldogs, which is
you saw they
fantastic.
changed all their Twitter handles, but
It's about time. Yeah, it's about
or their
time.
Twitter bio, I should say.
We should just
which
wear.
I thought was funny.
For one game, we should just wear red and black, just for one game.
It would be a funny, actually, like brand act, if you will. It'd kind of be, or like they could make money off of it and just sell merch.
Oh yeah.
And okay, so then you went to a game at Auburn, and I'm curious, as a Big Ten guy, what your take of going to a game in the SEC was.
It was really great. The fans were outstanding. They were classy. They were very welcoming, very nice to us. The atmosphere was so much fun, and we really kicked the hell out of Auburn. So it wasn't necessarily like, oh, the mighty SEC took us down.
Totally.
We swept them 2-0 in the series. So I felt pretty good about that. Granted, Auburn is down, so everything in the appropriate perspective. But the tailgating experience was great. Fans that we met, outside the stadium, even at the hotel that saw us wearing Penn State stuff, they were very welcoming. Want to make sure we were having a good time, knew where to go, what to see, what to do. Everything was just great. The stadium environment was awesome, and it helps when you win. That was really good.
That reminds me that going to a game at Penn State, a whiteout is on my sports bucket list. What is on your sports bucket list?
Oh, that's a great question. I've gotten, I think like a lot of Americans, I've got into F1 Drive to Survive on Netflix. So I really want to go to an F1 event, whether that's in North America or overseas. I think, the crown jewel is Monaco. So, I mean, something in F1 would be great. God, I thought about this not long ago. I've been to NHL games. I've been to NBA games. I've been to Major League Baseball games. I'd love to see an English Premier League game in the UK. That'd be amazing. The environment there, again, is just outrageous. It seems they're just ravenous for those teams. So I would love to see something of that ilk. But yeah, those are the two big ones that jump out to me.
Do you watch Ted Lasso?
Yes, definitely gotten into Ted Lasso.
What else do you like to watch on TV? This is the rapid fire question.
No, I love this.
I just asked you about your personal life.
That's okay. No, I'm into Ted Lasso. I also watch Letterkenny. You know what Letterkenny is?
No.
Letterkenny's a Canadian comedy that I think is like 11 seasons, and it's just it's ridiculous. And then there's a spin-off show that,
Mm.
if you're into sports, and I know you are, there's a spin-off show from Letterkenny called Shoresy, and it's about hockey.
Okay.
It's like a funny love letter to hockey.
Oh,
It's the best. I like 30 Rock. I like Parks and Recreation. I've been watching Dave on FX. I've been a long time fan of Lil Dicky and the Dave Show altogether. So
mm,
yeah, a lot of examples
okay. Wait, it seems like you like a lot of Canadian cultural things.
there. Yeah, I don't know why that is. I don't know why that is. I think that's mostly I started working for Impact, and Impact's parent company, Anthem Sports and Entertainment, is based in Toronto. My boss,
Ah,
Scott Demore, is Canadian. So I think it's just naturally oozing through
like
my
in,
veins
yeah.
like maple syrup. Yeah, I think it's just a
Okay.
natural progression.
So speaking of food, talk to us about the time that you worked at Olive Garden, what
Mm.
your favorite thing to eat was, what that experience was like. Was
It's
everyone family?
when you're there, you're
Yeah,
family. It was a magical experience. My friend Sean got me the job there. He was working there as a waiter. I got a job as a seating host initially, and eventually I moved to the to-go counter where I was filling, to-go orders.
that seems like
Uh,
a promotion.
yeah, it was a promotion. It was
Yeah.
definitely better. There's just a lot of aspects of serving, quote unquote Italian food in central Pennsylvania. So my family actually is a little bit Italian on my
Mm.
mom's side. So to hear people say, "Oh, I'll have the ganacchi and I'll have the minestrone," your eyes just roll into the back of your head. So
I I was trying to
yeah.
be like, "What is Minestrone?" And then I was like, "Oh,
Mhm.
oh,
Yeah, no,
yeah."
the minestrone
The
soup.
famous Minestrone soup.
The famous minestrone, yeah,
Yeah.
the minestrone soup, the minestrone soup, and gnocchi soups and all that, like, those were the safest, I'll put it that way, the safest options in terms of caloric intake, because once you
And bread.
see yeah, so the breadsticks,
Do you know
like,
something about the breadsticks?
those are, like, 250 calories a pop.
Oh, you're just saying they're unhealthy. You're
Yeah,
not
I mean,
saying they're
like,
bad.
no, they're not bad for you necessarily. Like, they're delicious. They go
Right,
down
right,
very
right.
easily. But
But they're not bad.
if you walk into Olive Garden thinking that, oh, I'm gonna walk out having had a healthy meal,
No, right.
the calories might say otherwise. The
What
food's gonna be great, but
what is what is an average salad?
depending on how much cheese you put on it, it can
Oh, yeah,
be
they put a
north of
lot of
500 calories because you can put a lot of vinegar and stuff like that on it. There's a lot of dressings that go with it.
cheese.
So
The croutons are like the size of this microphone.
they're
I have a
huge.
funny story about the breadsticks.
Hit me.
Um, when I was working in Arkansas, I worked with this meteorologist who just was so quirky and great guy. Like if he hears this, I think he will enjoy this. Like he was the type of guy who would eat like frosting for dinner or like from the tub and just like
Mm,
kind of like childish foods. And like I mean that's a perfect example. So one time for a dinner break, he solely came back with breadsticks from Olive Garden. And I was like, "Oh, that's amazing. You went to Olive Garden for dinner. What did you get for dinner?" And he was like, "You're looking at it. I got the breadsticks. Nothing else, no dip, no pasta, no minestrone, um, and no ganaki." And it literally, I mean, there were probably 8 breadsticks in there, and I think he ate them all. So I mean, at least he got a filling dinner,
mhm,
but it was only breadsticks, and it was like still to this day a core memory for me.
mm.
Um, and I hope he hears this and knows that it was like something I'll always remember
I hope he
because I was
makes
just
changes. I hope he makes some positive changes in his life, you know?
yeah, I mean, and it wasn't like this isn't a child, so
Mm.
it was crazy, but I mean, the breadsticks they are really good. I don't know that I could eat like 6, and I don't know that it's a dinner, but you know what? To each his own.
There are plenty of instances we've all been forced to have something for dinner that we really would have liked to have done something maybe a little bit better, a little bit healthier, but especially when you're in a pinch and it's like, all I can eat is this,
Yeah.
candy bar or something like that, and then I have to run.
A
It's life.
and you were talking about, you're and I like I said, he wasn't a child and he wasn't right out of college, but, like, when you are on a journalist salary and you're making ends meet. I mean, maybe you just need breadsticks. And I very much understand that. Like you were talking, looking for jobs on the STA talent website. Like I actually wanted to ask you, if when you were right out of school, like, did you apply to traditional local news jobs, like looking for a sports broadcaster job, or did you just happen to find the WWE one and all the pieces fell into place?
No, so I was working my network as much as I could and paying attention to STA talent. I had no interest in working in local sports.
Yeah.
And it's nothing against anybody that does that. I had done an internship in Hartford, Connecticut, working in their sports department, and the sports segment was 2 minutes or less.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember working in the tape room and seeing the pressure that the reporter was under to try and condense the tape and write a script, etc. And it wasn't so much the pressure of it. It just didn't seem fun. It didn't seem like something I was like, I don't understand why somebody would commit themselves to this type of existence. And maybe that was a singular experience, but that, like many internships, shaped the way that I wanted to move forward. And I think it's such
Totally.
an important thing for college kids. Do a freaking internship, paid or
Yeah.
unpaid. Do it. You're going to find out what you want to do and what you don't want to do. And that's far more valuable information than any paycheck. So when I was looking on STA Talent, I was looking for teams that I could go work for. A lot of jobs in baseball, minor league baseball. So I had applied to the Billings Mustangs in Montana.
Oh.
I made it to the second round of interviews and didn't get it. And then a few months later, the WWE opportunity came up. So I've been working my network within State College also as well at that point in time. Really wanted to stay connected to the Penn State sports community. Just didn't work out that way, but it worked out in a different way. So I have nothing to complain about.
What is your like dream opportunity within wrestling, if you have one? And I mean, kind of a job interview question, but like, where do you see yourself going with this opportunity that's presented itself to you and that you've been able to do now for what's more than 10 years?
Yeah, it's an odd question. In wrestling, I'm very fortunate in that, I've been able to check a lot of things off my bucket list. And WWE is a powerhouse within professional wrestling and in entertainment as a whole. So it's no slight on any other promotion. I am thrilled to be a part of Impact, a company that I believe is on the rise and is trying to get back to its former glory. I want to be a part of that. I want to see this company into the future. What that looks like exactly, that's not really for me to say. That's for me to help build and be a part of, and to be the voice for a lot of those moments. It means the world to me. I think not maybe, the most emotional moment in my career up until this year had been Kofi Kingston winning the WWE Championship at WrestleMania, commonly referred to as Kofi Mania. And that was until we did the Rebellion pay-per-view this past April. And a friend of mine, Steve Macklin, who I've been friends with since our time in WWE, since 2014, we met, became the Impact World Champion. And a journey that was, twisting and winding, and he worked his ass off to get to that point. He helped me get a foot in the door at Impact, helped me get a job there. So I was in tears after the show. So to be a part of more moments like that for Impact, to help them get back to the glory that they have experienced and that they are entirely capable of getting back to again, that's what matters to me right now.
So now I get to ask you my favorite question. What's the best piece of advice you've ever gotten?
Best piece of advice I ever got.
Or your favorite piece of advice, I guess.
I remember writing this in my this is cheesy. I remember writing this in my high school yearbook, my senior year, as a little, like, there was a page you could write, a thank you to family or friends or something like that. And I remember writing to my parents, thank you for telling me all the things I didn't want to hear, because I can be a little thick-skulled, and some things that everybody wants to be right. I want to be right. I want to do the best job possible. Sometimes you just don't necessarily want to hear certain things, and I need to hear those things. I'm very fortunate. I've had a lot of people over the years who have told me the things that I didn't want to hear and made sure that I didn't just fall by the wayside. And those are people in WWE, now in Impact, my opportunities with ESPN, my opportunities with Believe, in my personal life, my close circle of friends, the people have been willing to tell me to my face, hey, this is going great, but this needs to be better. Hey, you really messed this up. This needs to improve, etc. So having those people in your life, it's critical, because otherwise you can't grow.
That's a good one. And I always say that every time I ask somebody that, I never get the same piece of advice, and we've done it again, a fresh piece. You mentioned Believe, State of State. We've talked so much about Penn State, and everyone can listen to your podcast, talking all things Penn State, not just football, right?
Yes, so we're steadily going to get into talking about more Penn State sports. I hope to expand the people that you see on the channel to cover Penn State basketball, Penn State hockey, maybe even Penn State wrestling. Not pro wrestling, but the legitimate great wrestling that you see at Penn State. They win national championships every single year. So I'm hoping to expand things beyond just the Penn State football program. But right now, myself and Justin King do State of State. We come out right now every Wednesday on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts. And then once the season gets underway, we'll be doing preview and recap episodes probably 2-3 times a week, something like that. So I'm having a great time with it. It's a labor of love. I care about Penn State. I care about the community, and hopefully we're giving back in a small way. Especially with the rise of NIL benefits. Is something I feel very strongly about, is giving back to active student athletes, improving their present, but also their future. So hopefully we can do a small part in that. So we'll see.
That's awesome. You shared where everyone can find the podcast. And as we wrap up, where can everyone find you?
I am on Instagram and Twitter at Tom Hannifan, TomHannifan. I am in all those places with the podcast, and then Impact Wrestling is every Thursday night here in the United States on Access TV. That's AXS TV. You can check us out for our live broadcasts on Impact Plus, Fight TV, YouTube for our Ultimate Insiders, and all the information is at impactwrestling.com. So that's been your scoop du jour.
That's been your scoop du jour. That is a great way to end it. I mean, you did it for me. And where can everyone find my podcast? Can you close it out?
Scoop du jour is online.
Everywhere where you can find your podcast.
Everywhere you can get your stuff.
Yeah. I need that broadcast voice that has been like 11 years in the making, 11 years plus, like the Tom Hannifan broadcast voice is really good. Maybe we can have an intro made.
You just got to say it confidently. It can be absolute nonsense, but just say it with confidence and you'll be fine.
I took voice and diction in college, and we had a really good professor. I love to do this, end the show and then not really end it. His name was Professor Cup, and we used to lay on the floor and practice our voice and diction with our diaphragm and use crisp consonants. And I was so fond of him. I still am. And he was so wonderful. And I always wonder if I'm doing him justice in how I was a broadcaster and on my podcast. I'm are my consonants crisp, or am I just saying all the time? I don't know. Anyway, that's your scoop, Tom. This was a pleasure. It was so nice to chat with you, to meet you. We should get Olive Garden when you're here in Chicago doing all wrestling things. But you know what? Chicago has good Italian food, so we can get some gnocchi and minestrone elsewhere.
Perfect. I'll see you in Chicago. Yeah.
Tom, thank you.